It begins in London on May 5th, 1905, inside the Old Bailey, where the air is thick with anticipation and something far less visible. Two brothers stand accused of murder, their fate hanging not on a confession, not even on a weapon found in their hands, but on something so small it could be missed entirely. A faint, greasy mark lifted from the underside of a cash box sits at the center of this case. It doesn't move, it doesn't speak, and yet it carries a weight that no one in the courtroom fully understands yet, because what is about to happen is not just a trial, it's a quiet revolution. To understand why, we have to step back to the morning of March 27th of the same year, 1905. A man named William Jones arrives at a paint shop on Deptford High Street, expecting the routine start of another workday. Instead, he finds the shop shuttered and silent. That alone is unusual enough to raise concern. But when knocking brings no response, and a glance through the window reveals overturned chairs, the situation shifts from strange to alarming. Within minutes, help is gathered, and the door is forced open. Inside, the scene is grim. Thomas Farrow, an elderly shop owner, lies dead on the floor. Upstairs, his wife Anne is found alive, but barely. She's unconscious and gravely injured. Both have been beaten. The attack was not quick, and it was not clean. It suggests determination, perhaps desperation, and certainly violence. A doctor is called. The police arrive. But already the case presents a problem. There are signs of struggle, but very little in the way of clear answers. Investigators quickly determine that robbery is the likely motive. The cash box, of course, is empty. Its contents are missing. Yet there is no sign of any forced entry, and that detail matters. It suggests that the attackers were either known to the victims or managed to gain entry without raising suspicion. Two makeshift masks, fashioned from ladies' stockings, are found on the scene, confirming that there were two assailants. Blood patterns suggest that the victims were attacked separately, and that Thomas Farrow may have briefly regained consciousness before being struck again. Then comes a moment that feels almost incidental. A police sergeant, trying to tidy the scene so that a doctor can move freely about, pushes the cash box aside with his bare hands. It's a small act, practical and unremarkable at the time. But when the senior officers later examine the box more closely, they notice something unusual on the underside of the inner tray. There's a smudge. It's greasy, faint, and easy to overlook. But someone pauses. Someone decides to look closer. Now here's where the story shifts in a way that no one at the time could fully predict. That smudge is recognized not as dirt, but as a fingerprint. And not just any fingerprint, but one that might identify a killer. This idea, while familiar to us today, was anything but certain back in 1905. In fact, this trial takes place after Sherlock Holmes, a fictional detective created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, had already been using fingerprinting and forensic reasoning in stories set in London. Fiction had moved faster than reality at the time. Readers had accepted the idea that a single print could solve a crime, but the real world had not yet fully caught up. So what happens next is not just bold, but risky. Investigators take the cash box to Scotland Yard's relatively new fingerprint bureau. At the time, the system held tens of thousands of prints. But of course, there's no immediate match. They don't have a computer database. They can't just put the fingerprint in the system and tell a computer, hey, find the match for this. That doesn't exist. They have to go through one at a time, one after another, through these tens of thousands of prints. But with no immediate match, that means that they need suspects and they need names. They need something to compare against this silent mark from the cash box. And witnesses begin to come forward. Two men had been seen leaving the shop around the time of the crime. Their descriptions point toward couple of brothers by the name of Alfred and Albert Stratton. They're not strangers to suspicion they're known locally. They're connected to the edges of criminal life. Their behavior after the crime raises a bit more suspicion, too. So, a girlfriend mentions a sudden appearance of money, and one of the brothers throws away his clothes. This sounds odd, does it not? Old stockings are requested from her before this. And none of this proves anything necessarily, but it begins to form a pattern. So when the brothers are arrested, their fingerprints are taken. But then something changes. The prints from the cash box, the print from the cash box, is compared to the prints taken from Alfred Stratton. The match is precise. It's not vague. It's not suggestive. It's not it is detailed. They have multiple points of agreement. For investigators, this is the breakthrough that they need. And for the courtroom, this is something entirely new. The trial begins, and with it comes a challenge. The prosecution is about to ask a jury to trust something that they cannot see in the way that they are used to seeing evidence. They can't hold it. They can't look at it. This isn't a knife that's sitting on a countertop there in the courtroom. There's no eyewitness that can point and say, that's the man that did it. There's no confession that can be read out loud. Instead, they're presented with a scientific argument. They explain how fingerprints are formed, how they are unique, how they can be compared, and they bring in even an expert. It's Inspector Collins, and he walks the jury through the process in terms that they can understand. The defense, of course, pushes back hard. That's their job. They bring in their own expert, and he's a man who claims that the prints do not match. And for a moment, it seems as though the case might collapse under the weight of conflicting testimony. Because, after all, if experts can't agree, how can a jury make a decision based on that expert witness? But under cross-examination, the defense expert is confronted with letters he had written offering to testify for either side depending on who paid him more. In that instant, his credibility completely evaporated. The jury is left with a stark contrast. On one side is a consistent scientific explanation. On the other is a witness whose impartiality has been completely shattered and his credibility is gone. The rest of the evidence supports the prosecution, but it's the fingerprint that anchors the case. Witnesses place the brothers near the scene. Circumstances, of course, raise suspicion, but the print places one of them directly in contact with the object tied to the crime. This does not rely on personal memory. It does not change under pressure or being paid off. This just exists. When the jury retires to deliberate, they carry with them something new. This is not just a case, but a concept. This is a way of knowing that does not depend on human perception. After just over 2 hours, they do return with a verdict. Guilty. And the sentence for both was death. Within weeks, the Stratton brothers are executed, and with that, history shifts. This becomes the first time that in Britain, fingerprint evidence leads to a murder conviction. This was a single mark left behind without any thought that became a deciding factor between life and death. What makes this story linger is not just the crime or even the trial, but the transition it represents. There's a world where justice depended on what people saw and said begins to give way to a world where evidence can exist independently of human error. The human memory is faulty. It always has been. Witness testimony can only be trusted so far. It's striking to remember that while fictional detectives had already been convincing readers that this idea might exist, it took this real case in 1905 with real consequences to finally convince a courtroom. So here's the question I want you to think about, and I want you to answer it in the comments below. You know how I love your comments. If you were sitting on that jury in 1905 hearing about mystical things like fingerprint evidence for the very first time, would you have trusted it enough to convict someone of murder? There are people now who doubt DNA evidence because it is still somewhat new. And of course, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you follow Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. And make sure you subscribe to the History Happens podcast so you never miss an episode.